course, Civics.
Next, we will hear from Martine Dosa as she interviews media literacy educator Chris Perry.
Awesome. Thank you so much all for that incredible conversation. Your insight, Leo and Nardos, was incredibly interesting and definitely resonated with me a lot as a student. So yeah, to briefly introduce myself, my name is Martine Dosa. I'm currently a college student, but I'm a 2022 graduate of Syracuse City Schools. Born and raised, I'm here right now for spring break. I've been involved with the student branch of the Democracy Ready New York Coalition for about 4 years now, which is insane. And I'm grateful to be here today in conversation with Chris Sperry. So thank you, Chris, so much. I can do a brief introduction before we begin. So as a classroom teacher for over 40 years, Chris developed the methodology of constructivist media decoding that is core to the Project Look Sharp approach to media literacy integration. Chris currently directs Project Look Sharp's librarians as leaders for media literacy, or ML3, initiatives. Chris taught middle and high school social studies, English, and media studies for over 40 years in the Lehman Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. He's the author of numerous curriculum kits related to global studies and US history, and he is co-author of Teaching Students to Decode the World, Media Literacy Across the Curriculum. He has also delivered hundreds of media literacy workshops, classes, and keynotes for educators in the US, Turkey, Iran, India, Kenya, Panama, and Bhutan. Chris is the recipient of the National Council for the Social Studies 2008 Award for Global Understanding and the 2005 National PTA and Cable Leaders in Learning Award for Media Literacy. So we clearly have an expert with us today. It's great to be in conversation with you. I'll begin with the question that we're starting each panel with, which is, where do you see the intersection of civic education and technology?
Thanks, Martine. Thanks, Democracy Ready. Wonderful to be here with you. It was just great listening to Nardos and Leo speaking so much of what's in my heart, but from a different generational perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have the facility that those young people just spoke with and that kind of immediate experience. So my role here is really to speak from a different generational perspective on, okay, having sat through, you know, when television was controversial in the classroom, you know, to today, you know, what does my generation have to offer, or folks who've been doing this work for a long time, and also recognizing what the young generation essentially must lead and have to offer around this work. So the question of the intersection of civics and technology, I think I'm going to shift the question, if I can, a little bit, because I think of technology as tools to be able to use not only in positive ways, but certainly in all different ways. And the focus that I want to shift to has to do with teaching and learning, that has to do with literacy, it has to do with communications, the role that technology play in our communications, our ability to be engaged with changing our worlds and being active participants in society, in our schools, you know, in our families, in our communities, in our nation, in our world. And that's what civics is to me in all different kinds of ways. Leo recently talked about, you know, really what we need to do is kind of turn the teaching back to the kids, to the students,
Mm-hmm.
to have them be engaged. And for me, that's going to be at the heart of any discussion of civics. So how can technology, and then I will continue to be talking about media and about literacy, communication, how can that support civic engagement so that students are, from the media literacy perspective, continually reading their worlds and writing their worlds.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I really love that idea of giving power to students in the classroom setting. So you talk about, you'll speak more about media literacy. I'm really curious to hear your perspective there, and also specifically how schools can promote media literacy.
So it was just great listening to the conversation. I mean, I had some plans of what to speak to and have completely shifted, you know, some of that based on listening to the artist. So, you know, there's really good work being done in media literacy and has been for a long time around, for instance, the creation of media. An essential part of media literacy is students, young people, using media themselves to actively engage in communicating their ideas, their messages, expressing themselves, critiquing society, changing society. And that's been spoken of already today. And there are many good organizations doing that work. If people are looking for particular organizations in any of these areas, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, or NAMLE, namely, has lots of great lists and annotations about different organizations. There's also organizations, people represented here, who are doing great work around AI, for instance, and around specific media forms. There's lots of organizations and work being done around safety issues and protecting our students. Cyber safety, something was referenced earlier, in terms of internet safety and that. What I'm going to speak to today in terms of my experience connects to what I heard the young people speaking about, is how can we integrate what we need to about media literacy across the curriculum, from pre-K through high school, in a way that gives agency to students, but that also gives them the skills, and I'm going to use the word the habits, that they need for critical thinking of all media messages. AI is incredibly important for us to think about, but young people today still spend 4+ hours a day on what we would call video. What was once called television. Recorded music, incredibly important and influential. So we can't just forget, the old media. So books, still important media in the classroom. So how do we give students, in Leo's word, put them in the center of the teaching with each other about these media issues? And that's the work of Project Look Sharp, working with librarians around the state and around the country, training teachers, to, whenever we use any media or technology in the classroom, to also think, I need to also be asking questions. And the question might be as simple as this: is this credible or not? Or who made this and for what purpose? Or what impact might this media form have on the message? Or who might benefit and who might be harmed by this message or by this technology? Or how do I interpret this differently and see this differently than the person next to me? What might I learn from thinking about somebody else's, but I also want I learn about myself and the way in which my own identity impacts how I interpret these messages. That can be done in a kindergarten class studying nutrition and how we look at food packaging, to think about, is there fruit here or not? And why do we think there's fruit? But how would we know if there's fruit in this or not? And to think about, why would they put fruit there if there's no fruit in it? And so getting at credibility issues. Or, as we explore memes, in high school English, to think about who made this and for what purpose and why are they presenting this and what's their perspective? How do I interpret and how can I? So if we can get teachers, whenever they use technology or media in the classroom, to say, I also need to ask questions. And then I'll end with this one. That I not only am going to ask questions, I'm going to listen really well to what students have to say. And I am going to think about where that student said something that's really essential for understanding what we're studying in science or in math. So instead of now saying, great, this is an opportunity for me to say yes, and then tell you, this is an opportunity for me as a teacher to say, tell us more about that.
Yeah.
What would you say that? Does everybody agree to this? And turn it back to the students to teach each other, because we know it's more effective that way, to inquire and ask questions, to be curious, so that ultimately, if we can develop habits of questioning across the curriculum in all subject areas through the way in which teachers use media in the classroom, which they're using all the time, we can then prepare students for the new media forms beyond AI that we can't even anticipate, because they are asking some of those essential questions which will transcend some of the aspects of new technology. There will also be unique aspects of AI and the two technologies that are coming, as well as books and paintings, et cetera, that we need to explore independently by that question of what are the qualities of this media form?
Right.
And how is that unique? And what are its strengths? And what are its challenges? And what do we need to be aware of? So long-winded answer to your question.
No, I appreciate it. And it makes me think, I would imagine that it's sort of like the phrase inquiring minds want to know, that asking all of these questions also not only improves student learning, but also just the classroom environment and climate. It's more engaged. Students are excited to learn from one another. Have you found that to be true, either as your experience as a teacher or
I'm
as a
glad
leader?
you honed into that. What made you say that? Why do you think that it would be more engaging for students?
I think, I mean, I can think of my own experiences in high school with teachers that did exercises that were more, I guess, like dialogue focused, where students could learn from one another and our experiences. It felt more, I think, natural sometimes, and I think also it also made me remember some themes more. If I could connect a topic in English class to an experience I had last week, I think it makes the lesson more memorable too.
You know, there's a lot of research about the fact that if students really are trying to solve a problem, they're inquiring genuinely
Hmm.
about that, that the likelihood of them really learning and holding on to it is just much more
Yeah.
significant. I'm going to get up there and I'm going to tell you the answer to this question. You know, I'm going to put it on the board and expect you to repeat it back on the exam. But in fact, if we can learn to shift our teaching to be more inquiry-based, more question-based, focused on student curiosity and motivation, but mostly we can listen to how students make meaning of their world, and we can cue into that and have students teach each other. It shifts the role of teacher from being
Hmm.
the person who is the authority in the classroom to tell you what's true, and you're supposed to write that down and repeat it back to us on the exams, to not the teacher's the one who knows the kids really well, knows them, can read their body language, knows their backgrounds. And there's an infodemic of information. Our issue, our thing is not to get you the information, it's to help facilitate how you think about that information. And really importantly, how you think about your own thinking.
Yeah.
So artists talked um, about the of confirmation bias. We AI is a really great example. We know we've crossed the Rubicon where we can no longer, oh yeah, here are the techniques and strategies for figuring out if this is a deep fake or not. Well, you can go online, you can search laterally and look for that. But what's
Hmm.
really critical is when our young people look at an image, they are thinking, is this accurate or not? How would I know it's accurate? Where would I go to figure that out? But even more, equally important, where is my critical thinking weak? Where do my confirmation biases make it more likely for me to believe something that's not true and share that and pass it on to
Hmm.
others? That's not built into the New York State standards, other than in early elementary, students reflecting on their own emotional responses and why. We need to build it into science, into social studies, and into health, and into math, and all areas to think about our own thinking about a myriad different kinds of issues and content that we're teaching. So that metacognition is another
Yeah.
arena that media literacy can help build in, and it's going to be absolutely critical with AI, so that our students have the habit of thinking, oh, yeah, I'm drawn to that one. I'm likely to pass that on, but I'm going to pause for a minute and think whether I should or not, because that fits what I believe. So my motivated reasoning draws me in that direction. I'm onto myself. I recognize it, and I want to stop. So,
Great. Well,
to you.
yeah, thank you. That's fascinating. I think I'm also curious in thinking of how media literacy, I think it's probably been a theme that some teachers and librarians have been thinking of for a while, but my guess is it has changed a lot, especially in recent decades as technology has just like evolved more and more and more. I'm curious if you just have any reflections over your career so far, of how media literacy has changed and sort of what it looks like in this moment.
Well, I love being able to do this with a cross-generational group. And, let you
Likewise.
know that when I started teaching in 1978, the wonderful little progressive public democratic alternative school, where I had to be focused on student agency. We still get into the gym, 300 kids once a week, 6th through 12th grade, to make the fundamental decisions of the school. It's a public school in New York State. Our assessments are performance-based, around what drives student engagement and learning, et cetera. But when I started teaching with really diverse students, kids whose parents taught philosophy at Cornell University and kids whose parents and grandparents had never graduated from high school, but who were brilliant, they were taking apart my car. In
Hmm.
fact, I could recognize that I needed to teach in a different kind of way. So for me, and I was a media kid, it was bringing media into the classroom to teach history, for instance. So it was literally vinyl records, and then decoding, analyzing and evaluating the messages and connecting it to the history we're studying. It was 16 millimeter film clips. It was 35 millimeter transparencies up on the board. It was expensive. It was hard. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
It is phenomenally, not even exponentially, just infinitely easier now for educators to use media in the classroom to diversify the kind of text, as well as our books and our posters on the wall and our paintings, but to diversify the kinds of text that we use in the classroom and diversify the ways in which students can express themselves, the ways in which we can assess them, et cetera. That is remarkably accessible. At the same time, we also have to be, and this is the change over time, thinking about the unique qualities of these different media forms like AI. And what I heard the young people speaking about was really cueing into, well, here's the benefits of this, and here's the problems with this. I heard Leo speak really clearly too, but I really want to know how this is going to help me and hurt me. We can teach that quality of curiosity by practicing with students, by modeling and having them ask questions about, well, what medium would I use? And why would I use this? And what's the qualities of a puppet show? Or me just talking to the class versus my PowerPoint presentation, or AI, why should I use it and how? We need that to be integrated into the curriculum. We can when we focus on the habits of critical thinking about all forms of media and technology.
Great. That's fascinating. I think just thinking of the setting of this generational space today, this being a youth-led panel, I'm curious, as we close off with our final question, if you your words of wisdom to young people here, and what your advice is of how we can not only be media literate, but also be promoters of media literacy and advocates of media literacy. If you have any final words for us on that.
I am inspired today by listening to the young people before me about what you have to offer in terms of your facility with different media forms, both from an activist perspective, but from a critical thinking perspective, and what we have to offer from a previous generation in doing this work. It is essential that the experts, don't hold on to our view, but that we synthesize what is it that transcends the generation, that is critical to hold on to. What is it that young people and other people understand who are fluent with these different media forms like AI, but not just AI, and how can we collaborate and work together so that we are building a generation of civic ready, college and career ready young people who can be personally empowered, but in the context of their communities and their worlds, so that they are ethical, they are well-reasoned, they are informed, they are self-reflective, they are curious, and are consistently inquiring about these kinds of questions that we have talked about, so that, in the words of Paulo Freire, they can read and write their worlds.
Well, that's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you very much for your time today, Chris. It was really wonderful, especially to hear from a fellow upstate New Yorker about your experience leading in this field. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it along to fellow students, Cheyenne and Anna.
Hi, thank you, Martine and Chris, for that wonderful interview and dialogue. I'm Anna or Anna, either from Northern Long Island at Wood Noble High School, and I'll be with Cheyenne.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne, a junior from Cardinal Spellman High School. Okay.
And today we're actually honored to introduce Commissioner of Education, Betty Rosa. Cheyenne, you want to take it away?
Yeah, she has an amazing backstory. So to start, Dr. Betty Rosa is the first Afro-Latina to hold roles of Commissioner of Education and President of the University of the State of New York. She brings over 30 years of experience to her work. She is known for her dedication to helping all students succeed regardless of their background. Dr. Rosa's academic journey includes earning degrees from Harvard University, and she has received numerous awards for her contributions to education. Her leadership is marked by a commitment to inclusivity and empowerment. With a wealth of experience spanning more than 3 decades in the field of education, Dr. Rosa is widely recognized for her tireless dedication to ensuring every student, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to thrive. Her journey from starting as a teacher's assistant to assuming leadership roles speaks volumes about her commitment to inclusive education and student access.
So, Dr. Rosa, where do you see the intersection of civic education and technology? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. And I got to listen to the previous presenter and was quite absolutely engaged in the conversation and the exchange. And I thought that he absolutely set the stage for the next part of this conversation. So I do see the intersection, as we know that when we think about civic learning, right, we think about our young people developing. The important piece here is developing, as he also talked about, knowledge, skills, dispositions, and commitment to one of the key things is improving communities, your own communities, right? That you give voice to some of the issues in your own community, which is a starting point for many students. And by your own community, I talk about communities inclusive of your schools, inclusive of your house of worships and other places, right? Where you, as young people, do a great deal of work to think about, to learn, to look at some of the key focus and priorities, and clearly begin to early on do some work in research, facts, create some evidence, and formulate those amazing arguments that you use to give you an opportunity to say, these are the kinds of things that we would like to see, right? You do that in school, you do that in other places. So I think that the participation in your own and our own democracy is a great intersection with having, of course, looking at some of the instructional learning process, some of the instructional technology, and accessible tools. And those, those tools allow our young people, the technology, obviously, to use and to enhance the teaching and the learning process. And particularly, I find it's exciting to think about the digital divide, but also generational divide. And how do you get it closer and closer and closer, right? So that with whether it's the new media forms or the way that you use the media to ignite and excite and create the imagination of your own learning. So I think the intersection is access, a way to truly think about some of the facts, way to think about, and by the way, and not beyond the learning, as I said, the knowledge, skills, it really lends itself for innovating, and it lends itself for creativity and problem solving. So I do think that there are some amazing intersections and possibilities.
Thank you, Dr. Rosa, for that amazing answer. The second question is, as we all know, schools are without a doubt struggling with implementing technology into education. Policies such as phone bans, inaccurate AI detection systems, and technology in classrooms post-COVID are particularly contentious. How have you seen the role of technology in the classroom evolve over time? And do you think there's ever been a point of going too far with technology in the classroom?
So I'm going to say that obviously COVID had really many challenges, both emotional, right? A sense of isolation, trauma, and the disconnect, the human disconnect that took place as a result, right? Places that all of us were very comfortable with being part of. All of a sudden, we found ourselves unable to partake in that human connection. And so I think that we pivoted to the use of technology, and we pivoted to a way that we could use technology to continue that human connection and to continue the learning and to continue to engage with each other at a time when it was from a medical perspective was quite challenging, right? And so in order for the learning to take place, while I must say we also confronted the digital divide, right? Because the equity issue came into the forefront, particularly for those communities that did not have the resources and the equipment to continue the kind of engagement, the kind of learning that we know was and is essential. So I do think that schools learned many, many lessons during that period of time, and many, many lessons that we have incorporated and continue to hold on to as we continue to think about the whole issue of learning, but learning in a way that connects with the way our young people want to learn, need to learn, and are accustomed to. So the educational system, while it pivoted at that time, it needs to hold on to those amazing, valuable lessons, right? It needs to continue to, while there are, as we know, and we need the understanding of the possibilities, we also have to have the understanding of the risks. And we know that the shaping of the future in which technology serves as a tool for human empowerment and support is essential and will continue to be here. And so I truly believe that that was one of the lessons, major lessons, that we took away from the pandemic. And so holding on to that and continuing to think about learning as a 24/7, continuing the expansion of learning, continuing to think about learning in a way that ignites and excites our students to find and to do the kind of research, capstone projects, as many of you do, travel the world without necessarily leaving your own space, connecting with people that in many ways you and I know that if you can't afford to travel to those places, you could still connect. Those are amazing, amazing opportunities. Also learning, taking courses online and being able to incorporate your classroom learning and expanding and extending. I think it's an amazing, amazing way for that learning process to continue as a way to innovate and as a way to help students think about, as I said, the creativity and the problem solving, those things that you love, those things that you engage in school. Just think about getting together with a group of your peers that love a particular area and topic that you want to research, that you want to explore, that you want to really have more knowledge about. That's right now an amazing opportunity, and I consider it almost a gift as a way of using technology to do that.
So, Dr. Rosa, you just talked about all these wonderful opportunities that technology brings to the school system in general. How do you see the civic education curriculum specifically evolving to meet the technology of the future?
Sure. So as I said before, in terms of looking at understanding issues, even simple issues like, for example, in communities, nutrition, right? In communities where you think about ways of mental health, telehealth, right? Or if you think about, for example, I'm going to use a concrete example that happened with me. I was driving to see my mom, and I was driving with my son, who I thought had COVID. So we stopped. I immediately went on telehealth and spoke to a doctor at that point, and I was in North Carolina, got a prescription. He did not have COVID, got a prescription, tested him, and I had my medicine for my son within, like, I would say 45 minutes. So that kind of technology, right? That kind of, and the reason for that, it helps individuals in community, right? to really learn about ways of continuing their health, even when they're traveling. So I see the technology also helping young people think about, look at how much research is being done about weather, about a whole system, and how we can invest and have our young people do some research around the climate change. What an amazing way to engage in this whole notion of civic learning about the kinds of things we need to do in our community to maintain a healthy community, but also our planet, right? The other thing I see is, for example, and we all know that there are many, many challenges because we can reduce errors, like in weather forecasting. Think about weather forecasting as an amazing way. We know a hurricane is coming. We can prepare. And in terms of civic learning, how do we move as a community to support, right, our communities to make sure they have the proper equipment and everything else? What about hazardous situations where we, instead of sending a human into these kinds of situations, we could use robots, right, to go into and maintain the integrity of not risking our humans. Surgery, right? Civic, the doctors that are doing research in helping our young people advocate for some of these ways that we can make this information available. And so these are just some key examples of how I can think of how the intellect of humans connected to machines, right? Connected to our civic commitment and involvement is in that kind of triage is a way to really advance many of the things that we believe keep us responsible for each other.
That was a great answer. I really liked your aspect about saving people and helping people and moving beyond human intellectual abilities. But for our fourth question, we did conduct interviews as a coalition with our peers, and we found that many students feel there is a potential for technology to enhance civic learning, creativity, and social connectivity, like you have stated. However, many students know that the adults in their lives hold misconceptions around technology, as solely it means to cheat or socially isolate. How is the New York State Education Department addressing misconceptions about adults and the use of technology?
Great question. And I will tell you, I'm going to invite everyone after this to go to NYSED and look at our presentation this month, which was on AI, right? And in the presentation, we talked about, obviously the understanding of the possibilities as well as the risks, right? And we talked about the way that in not only just in schools within the P-12 space, but the ways that we can begin to educate each other on understanding the benefits, right? As well as the risk, because there are clearly risks involved, right? And I think that sometimes we operate from the risks first rather than the benefits. And so we have young people who want to innovate, and we have sometimes the adult world wants to regulate. And so while we have, for example, one of the conversations we had was about data privacy. We've got to protect our young people in terms of making sure that as they're accessing and using the technology, that we also have parent involvement, parents being very aware of some of the ways that young people can be impacted, not necessarily in a positive way. So this has the opportunity also for, and we talked about it during our Regents meeting, to look at family rights, to look at some of the personal identifiable issues that we want to protect. So, we do have some laws that do that, and we wanted to share that with the public, such as FERPA, the 2D, which is a law that protects personal identifiable information, and COPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and that is extremely important. So in this presentation, which I will ask not just the students that are listening to this, but other individuals that are paying attention, to go in and see some of the work that we're doing around both the AI, and next month, by the way, we have also another presentation, how we use it within the department. But we talked quite a bit about computer science, digital fluency, the learning standards and how they connect. We talked about finding that balance, right? And helping to create the integration of the teaching and learning, and how do we innovate and yet maintaining a cautious view on the ways that it could be misused, and the way that this technology, this new media form, can be a risk. So it's that whole balance. And obviously we want families to be intimately involved in having a better understanding of the, what we consider to be the possibilities as well as the risks involved.
So Dr. Rosa, in discussing the integration of technology in schools, can you point to specific and practical examples of measures schools can implement to ensure the responsible use of tech in schools?
Sure. Schools, for the most part, we provide guidance, as you know, right? And you may not know, but we do in the department. So schools do really take the responsibility, for example, of setting up most of you know, you have your student, having been a middle school and a high school principal, you produce your student, handbook, right? And in those handbooks, there are explanations of the kinds of things that we want to make sure that students internalize. You have your civic groups, even within schools, that help, your town hall meetings, help inform the students of the kinds of expectations of how to use this media and technology in a constructive kind of way. So schools have a tendency to obviously do the the sharing through different ways, whether they're in classrooms, right? For example, some of you are in classes that are computer, based, and they're doing the computer science and digital fluency learning standards. They go through that and they talk about finding that balance. But even beyond that, I think schools create various opportunities to ensure that students use the technology both in school and outside of school in a way that really supports the kinds of education and learning process, and can discern from some of the facts and some of the ways that we want students to grow with the technology, but grow with being cautious and being also, there's an awareness, and school is a great place, but also at home. A lot of you also engage with your parents, and if there's a concern, right, you do share some of the concerns with them to make sure that somehow whatever you're reading, whatever you're accessing, are these credible pieces of information? Are these even for your own research, right? You look at it and you think about, is it informing the kind of work that you're doing, whether it's for school or even an organization that you belong as a high school student? Some of you belong to some amazing groups outside, advocacy groups that clearly allow you to participate in your civic, what I call your civic commitment. And I do think that using the technology as a way of interacting with it in a positive kind of way, both in the school as well as in the community, but using guidance and knowing that there are individuals in your schools that, as I know the former presenter, will guide some of the and create some of the cautions, as I call it, for you to think about and internalize as you use this new media form.
Rosa, as a follow-up, do you believe, besides handbooks and caution, that there should be safeguards implemented or for safe technology use? And if so, at what levels, whether that be teachers or policymakers, should those be implemented?
Well, we do them at all levels. I mean, you're going to see them obviously at the state level. We go through those. That's why, the presentation we had, we do them at the district level. Your superintendents and your principals obviously are involved with that. We do them at the parent association levels, right? They engage with the school districts. And then you have, if you belong to various organizations, they too have that kind of, those structural protocols and guidance to ensure that you begin to internalize, what are the expectations, how you're using them to inform whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's writing a research paper all the way through to engaging in research to with a group of students and getting the kind of information that obviously you're going to incorporate into that research, as well as from a consumer perspective, right? It's also learning how to properly help, if you're involved in helping others in the community, how to make sure that the information that's being shared is validated. It's absolutely the kind of information that has been researched and can stand the test, as we say in schools, to make sure that it's factual and not going to create a kind of a narrative that has misconceptions and misinformation. So I think all those, you've got different places, and in some cases even in some of the volunteer work that you do, where you're working with, especially if you're working with the technology to inform the work that you're going to be doing for that organization, there are people that will help you through and guide that kind of work as well.
Okay, that was an amazing answer. I know for one of the previous questions, you talked about how the board has recently talked a lot about AI.
Yep.
And so what other topics, or maybe even if you want to expand on that, what topics in technology and media literacy has the Board of Regents focused on in recent conversations, and how might they enhance civic engagement among students?
Okay, so we talked, and when you go on the P12 presentation, which, by the way, we had during the presentation, we had various districts, individuals from various districts, all the way from New York City to Syracuse, really sharing with us some of the work that they're doing at the district and school level as well. So they talked about instructional, the instructional technology. They talked about accessible tools that are used within the school. They also shared with us AI, and again, the challenges and the possibilities, the risk, generative AI, distinction between AI, which is the understanding of these possibility and risk, as well as how generative AI is being used, shaping the future in which technology serves as a tool for human empowerment, which is really, you talk about civic, right, that intersection. It's having it so that it's human centric, right? So that people can use these opportunities, whether it's through surgery, through some of the other ways, to really minimize the human error that happens in some of these issues. We talked about the way that, and you'll see it, the way that the technology is helping students take classes all over, the world, and the way that it's being used for students to share in some places where they don't have a teacher to teach a particular subject area, where there's a shared learning opportunity by perhaps having the students take the course, during the school day, but another university professor or another teacher teaching the class. So there was a lot of crossing over and exchanging as a way of empowering the learning opportunities. So what you will see in the presentation are really the new way that learning can take place 24/7, but more importantly, the way that schools are going to transformation to support the same transformation that our young people are going through, so that we can catch up with your needs and kind of really make sure we align the opportunities and your learning styles and your learning process and the way you process information that is very different from some of the adults that are obviously engaging with you. So it's really the way that the department is looking at AI and the way that the districts are looking at AI, and generative AI is also a way to really advance the information that's out there, but making sure that we are helping to shape that future by having you have the best information and the best knowledge of the technology, so that we can empower our young people to use this as a tool for human centric progress.
With that inspiring note, we're actually going to pivot to a question asking what your plans are considering the school's staffing shortage among librarians and teachers, and how that staffing shortage might impact the implementation of media literacy curriculum.
Sure. So one of the ways that we're looking at is looking at the pipeline, obviously looking at including some of the barriers that we know have impeded individuals coming into the teaching profession. So that's one way, right? So obviously certification, you guys wouldn't, that's a whole different topic, but really being much more inclusive, much more open about some of these barriers that have not helped to bring talented individuals into the profession. So we're doing some of that work, but at the level of looking at the shortage of individuals, it's how do we take the existing teachers and resources and talent that we have and use the technology, right, to share that talent? What are the ways that, for example, if you live, let's say, in a rural community, and there's another young lady who lives, let's say, in an urban, and there's a teacher that's either in an urban, suburban, or rural, how do we share those resources? How do we find ways of not only just eliminating the barriers and bringing more people into the space, into our teaching profession, but also making it, creating the pathway for sharing the resources that we currently have? Because remember, if you took a course in algebra or geometry, you usually had the teacher in the classroom as your algebra geometry teacher. But now we have a lot of professors, we have a lot of teachers out there, so that we can use that technology as a way of importing that individual into the classroom where there may be a shortage for that content area. So it's really, in many ways, it's innovating, it's being creative, and helping to fill the shortage area at the same time that we are opening it up to the talent that's out there, and eliminating, as I said, the various barriers that keep many people from coming into the profession. And the one thing we want to do, and I always say this, it's not just about recruiting, it's also about retaining. So we want to make sure that as we are bringing people into the profession, that we're preparing them to be successful, because it's just as important to go beyond the recruiting. It's just as important to retain them in the profession and engage them and get them as excited as our students are, and as excited as those teachers that are in love with teaching and learning every single day.
Thank you. Now we're pivoting to actually hopefully similarly relevant and timely question from our audience, which reads, Commissioner Rosa, I love your focus on using civics and tech in local communities. Given that technology brings the global into the home with tremendous ease, what specific things do you think we need to do to keep from losing sight of local communities?
Well, I think the important issue is sometimes to localize a lot of times we don't take stock of our own community and the talents that are in our own community, but also the challenges, right, that are in our own community. For example, sometimes you grow up in a certain community, but you don't realize the surrounding community really creates an opportunity for DEI, for diversity, for equity and inclusion, right? So it's expanding that to allow individuals to realize that the connectivity, the human connectivity extends beyond your own small community that you may be a part of. And so that you as an individual and a group, it's an opportunity to also think about how do you learn and get to know perhaps a community that you are not a part of, but learn more about it and become that much more engaged in perhaps even having your community connect, or a small group of individuals connect with that neighboring community, and realizing that sometimes you're more alike than you realize, right? So I do believe that first and foremost, understanding, the nucleus of the family, then looking at your own community, but also thinking about your surrounding communities and expanding that. And how do you grow from having a broader understanding? And I truly believe DEI is a wonderful opportunity to do that, through diversity, understanding different cultures, different languages, different ways that people have, and internalize their own understanding of language and culture.
Thank you so much. Actually, now we'd like to invite Chris Sperry back to the Q&A to actually answer the same question in how we're able to connect communities through technology.
Right.
Okay, I'm back. So wonderful, Commissioner Rosa, to hear so many insights on so many different issues. I'll say I'm not sure in terms of the technology connection explicitly, but I know that democracy and civics also has to start in our schools, in our communities. And it needs to start with how we interact with young people, and the importance of the communities in our schools valuing the agency and the voice of our students and their thinking. And there's lots of ways in which we can use technology as tools to achieve that as well. But I think if students get a sense from the youngest age that they have voice and they have agency, that what they think matters, that their opinions matter, and that the information that they're responsible for has an application, that they're ethically responsible for helping their fellow human beings, that we need to build that throughout the curriculum of the school and the structure of the school and the pedagogy, the ways in which we teach that reflect that civic orientation and the 21st century skills that we need for students to deeply evaluate, reflect on, and act on well-reasoned and self-reflective information.
So can I jump in and tell you that as you were speaking to that issue, one of the ways, and you can actually go on, people can go on our website. When we did the BRC, right, which is our grad measures, right, and our Blue Ribbon Commission, students were very much a part of that commission. Right. And not only were they part, as you know, of that commission, but their voices were probably the most powerful. So when we came up with the 12, the 12 items, they talked about, many of them talked about graduation and what they saw it as the, as we call it, they reference the issue of the portrait of the graduate. What does that look like? They've referenced the issue of financial literacy, that the importance of having that. They reference the importance of a sense of belonging and having places that allow them, to your point, to have a voice in the decisions and having ownership. They were the core of the BRC. Their voices were captured. The adults participated, listened to, we had amazing groups of students throughout the entire state. We made sure that, their voices were heard. Now I'll give you a second one. The second one is My Brother's Keeper, as you know, MBK. Those students constantly have presentations. Those students constantly engage in having opportunities to share with us not only their own sense of owning the responsibility of being their brother's keeper or their sister's keeper, but also they're helping us to understand how do we advance the kinds of guidance, the kinds of decision-making that truly looks at what is it that they're interested. What is it that they're telling us? This is what our world looks like. This is how we want you to help us advance and give voice to. So we have had over the last several years, several initiatives that the students have been, I will tell you, the most amazing part of the conversations. Those are just two that I can tell you that and you can go on our website and watch the videos. They were spectacular. They were absolutely, when I tell you that we walked away and said, my God, not only is there hope, but the fact that these young people were able to articulate their sense about their experiences in high school and courses and the Regents exam and the content and the capstone projects and how they felt about the issues of supporting each other and on and on and on. We know that our world is in great hands in terms of the future for not only our society, but also our world.
I'm just gonna quickly jump in. Forgive me but I just want to say, Commissioner, I love the passion and the sense of how important it is to listen to students. I just got back before this from being a rater for performance-based assessment tasks at our local school. And similarly, anybody who would have seen, wow, this is students demonstrating their deep engagement, their voice, how excited they were to dive into research and to present to their peers and to these outside raters and to interact. We haven't talked much about the issue of assessment, but the relationship of assessment to civics in terms of how we can shift to a 21st century orientation towards assessing students' ability to be engaged with their own learning and have ownership fits really well with everything that you're talking about.
Right. And by the way, the focus of accountability was on ability, not so much on the accounting from the students' voices. They were very much a part of talking about help us to create multiple pathways, different ways of assessing us, different ways of demonstrating what we know, to your point. We have a couple of pilots on performance-based. The students spoke about help us to have not only a highway of learning, but the thing that I found particularly exciting and ignited my passion was when they talked about help us make school or schooling a place where you open up the walls, where you get rid of some of these barriers, time constraints, and all of these structural things that get in the way of having us, really truly allowing us to be creative and do problem solving. That was creativity and problem solving was on the top of their list. It became the top of our list. So their voices and their needs and their articulation of what was important to them in terms of, yes, hold us accountable, but at the end of the day, make sure that not only do you give us the tools, but that you create and help us create the pathway to these possibilities. More than glad. It is on our website. If you go to the BRC, I hope the students will also. Their voices were so much a part of this. And as I said, it's same thing with MBK, that it not only excites me, as you could hear me, but the entire 70 members were absolutely grateful and just really truly felt that this was an incredible, powerful year, listening to our students' voices to ensure that as we move forward, it's about them. It's not about the adults.
Thank you so much, Chris and Dr. Rosa. I think that's the end of our audience Q&A and the end of its panel. So sincerely, thank you so much for all your insights. And now I'm going to hand it off to Katie Luce, our wonderful leader, to make some closing statements about this great experience.
Yeah, thank you to all the panelists and our wonderful youth moderators. This has been just an incredible lineup, from youth activists to moving into an educator with Chris and Commissioner Rosa. Wow, I'm just so impressed with you all. So I'm really quick gonna share my screen with you. And thank you to our audience, of course, for joining tonight's event as a part of New York Civic Learning Week. If you're inspired to take action on the subject of media literacy in New York State, you can scan this QR code here, and this bill, S8217, it will require all New York students to have access to a quality media literacy education. Requires school library media skills, each elementary, intermediate, middle school, junior high, senior high, as well as a media literacy advisory committee. So if you have a chance, do scan the code and take action. It's a great way if you're feeling inspired.